Lemon Amiga presents a Playguide video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi there, welcome to another Lemon Amiga play guide and review. This time we'll be checking out Kingdoms of England. This was developed by Realism Entertainment over in Germany, and it was published by Incognito Software in 1989. See some credits in the game. Most of it was created by Brian G. Vodnik, and you can see some extra credits and playtesters as well, perhaps even a bulletin board. And moving on through some more loading, we eventually get to the only options in the game where we can change our name, and we can also enter the name of our realms as well. So let's enter our name as Dan, me, and we can choose one of 4 realms at the start of the game, so we can name our kingdom anything we like. Let's just call that Albion, and let's click on done, and you can see at the very top of the screen we can also change the percentage of land that we need to capture in order to win the game. So we'll leave that on 79, and we'll leave all the other options on standard. We don't get any difficulty levels in the game. All we can do is enter those stats for those realms, and I think it puts us onto the map wherever that is, depending on the realm that we've chosen. You can see we start in August 1421, and in 1421 that was King Henry V's time, going on to King Henry VI when there really wasn't much in the way of attackers on Britain. So what we're going to do is rewind 1,000 years back to 450 AD, and that means that we'll go all the way back to King Arthur's time. And in King Arthur's time we do get Saxon raiders appearing from over the seas, and the Celts at that time were all the way over in Wales and in Dunmorry, Devon, you can see. So this is the very first time I've seen the game, so I'll be trying to discover what I'm supposed to be doing. After a very quick warm-up, I discovered that I can build up some home castles, and I can also build up my forces. So let's see what we decide to do with 249 silver in the bank, and we can spend all of that silver, which we do mine in Wales, but not in this game. And so let's see, we're getting some crossbowmen, which cost 3 silver each, and crossbowmen are pretty useful at this early stage in the game. Well, let's see what I decide to do. I've created 50 of them, and we're going to put some soldiers in there, and it looks like some archers as well, leaving us 46 silver in the bank. And so that's created our first division, which hopefully will go out into the vicinity and capture those lands. So we can also improve the town from here as well, but we don't really need to improve the fortress. It costs us 200 points. Well, we can up to 200 points, and it costs us 25 silver per upgrade. So I don't think we'll be doing that. So we've now got our first skirmish army, so we can move army, and now we're in Buryport. Let's move that over, and let's move that army. Yes, we can now take over this realm, but we can't do it on this turn. We're in mountains territory, we're in Swansea according to that, but we'll have to wait till the next turn in order to take over that realm. And definitely at the beginning of the game, I'd recommend going back to the home castle and building up a second unit, and so that can attack the second territory adjacent to us. Now, going back all the way through time to maybe 450, something like that, you'll find that the kingdoms are ruled by the Picts in Scotland, the Scots, who are actually the Irish, and also the Celts in the west side of Britain. Dunmorry, Cornwall and the Saxons are starting to appear as well. So for the rest of this game, that's who I'm going to be referring to. And so you can see right at the start you can create a number of armies and they can take the adjacent territories. Definitely the ones in Dumnonia, Cornwall, is helpful because you can easily defend that area, and maybe Wales is even better because it's split up from most of the kingdoms and you can take a huge great area at the start of the game. So definitely get yourself at least maybe 2 or 3 armies at the very start of it, because when you're attacking these empty lands it's not really going to cost you much in terms of losing people, and you can see the Saxons are already spreading out through the east of the country. So that's the end of my turn. I've now captured this area, it's now got my flag on it, and unfortunately whatever is available in the army is going into the local castle, which isn't built at the moment, and that will be a Mott and Bailey castle. It won't have any defensive walls. So let's split the army from the castle. We have 54 units in there according to this, and so I'm not quite sure how to do it, but there you go. Somehow we've now freed all of those crossbowmen from that castle, and we've also freed all the archers as well. Some of the soldiers, it looks like, have been killed. So we've now move army. We've got army 3 on the march. So with those small numbers of people, let's move on to the next land, Gloucestershire and Monmouthshire. And again, if I knew this game at all, definitely create another set of soldiers, because we've got 122 silver in the bank. We can definitely use that. And so what have we got? 5 movement points, but we can't use that because, well, we can only invade 1 territory at a time. So let's enter that town again, hopefully, and let's build ourselves a 2nd division, because the more units that we've got on the ground, the easier it is going to be. So let's not bother upgrading the castle. Let's choose Army 1 this time, and soldiers, pathetic soldiers, will get mashed by the locals, but they aren't much good at this point. Definitely I'd recommend archers and crossbowmen. Even though they cost a lot more money, they will definitely be useful for defending that land a bit later on. And unless you have got crossbowmen and archers who can defend that land from a distance, you will find the usual foot soldiers will get demolished by anything, and I do mean anything, that's coming up to try to take that area. So it's definitely best at this early point to try to grab as many areas as possible, because our income depends on the size of our lands. So if, like the Saxons, you can grab 5 lands on the first turn, it should mean that your income is very much increased, and that has a knock-on effect of making things much more possible in the game. So here we are with our armies. Let's set them off. And Army 1 looks like it's invading the top part, and Army 3, Army 2, let's move Army 2 now, and we can move through areas that we've conquered already, and that means that we can move Army 2 through, hopefully, to our next destination. For now, let's skip a turn, and I think you have to press the right mouse button and then click the left to finish your turn, and then that will invade those territories, and it's not showing any resistance whatsoever at this point. And then it will move on to the computer, and the computer then will move, and depending on how smart the computer is. In this version we don't get anything in the way of difficulty levels, and the second game, Kingdoms of England 2 Vikings, we definitely won't be covering that in a play guide in this series, but it's basically the same game, only you get mines to get the silver, and you can mine for silver and iron in order to build your things up, and you definitely need that if you want to build up your pole axes and your battles of defence. In the second game it goes to a deeper level, and it's very much harder because it's got difficulty levels in it, and some players on Lemon Amiga said that this was a difficult game at the start because they didn't know to build several battle armies up from the start and go out rampaging onto these clear lands while it's all very clear. And that's precisely what we're doing. As soon as we click on a land, Aberystwyth, we can see who owns it, and we can see what defences we've got in there, and it will automatically go into our main castle. Don't forget, that's definitely a drawback of this game. As soon as you've conquered that, it will go into the main castle, so you have to split armies out of that castle again as the very first thing that you do, and then you can put those into a mobile army. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, and I think if you've already captured a territory, then it doesn't automatically do that, which is a bit of a problem with the game. It doesn't do that with the sequels, of which there are 2, and Kingdoms of Germany is Kingdoms of England Mark III, whatever you want to call that, and that's exactly the same game as the second version of the game, only all the brightness colours have been turned up to maximum. So you can see the brightness colour of movable is lit, so we can now move that into a territory, and we don't have enough soldiers to defend the lands that we're capturing at the moment, so what we're better off doing is moving north, and then we can grab loads of lands and increase our income. What I'm actually doing is going south at the moment into Gloucestershire. I'm trying to capture that area before the Dunmoria lot get hold of it, and it will depend on the number of soldiers that I've got at the end of all that as to whether we keep that land or whether it's taken away from us. And definitely at this point it's better to save your cash and buy some knights, and then whatever attacks us at this point, the knights will fend them off, no problem, and that means our money has been well spent. If you're wasting it on foot soldiers, then that's good against these pathetic little lands, but if you get attacked with foot soldiers, then there's no point using those. And if a territory is being attacked at this early stage, I don't like to build up my castles and build those up. We can only afford things and buy things from our home castle because it's a tower, and we can upgrade that to castle status if we want to defend that, but really it's like the settlers. Our home castle should be really the last thing that we need to defend. Moving away from the castle, it should be lightly defended, and on the borders it should be heavily defended with our best knights. And as long as that status quo remains, it means we should be able to defend those territories, and it means no attackers will attack us because there's no boats in this game. Again, unlike the sequel, no attackers will attack us unless they can get through our defensive front. Moving forwards in time slightly, you can see that we now have a number of lands, and we don't have any catapults, but the enemy won't build up their bases to need a catapult. At this point, all we need is a couple of catapults, and that should be good for taking down a base. So the bases come in towers in this game, and the enemies aren't smart enough to build castles, but they are definitely smart enough to build towers. You can see the Saxons have already built one, so that's not very good. So let's see what we decide to do. I don't think I need to attack anybody at this point, and if we stay exactly where we are, it just means that we'll take that territory and stay there in that territory. So we've now got that. It's September 14, whatever it said on the bottom, and so the time is ticking forwards, and I think it said 1461, but 461 is probably a better estimate for this type of game when we've got all these armies attacking Britain from all these directions. So let's see what the Picts decide to do, and they're being taken over, it looks like, by the Scotties. The Scotties came from Ireland, so Scotland got taken over by Ireland, and actually south of Wales got taken over by the Irish as well. So around this point, only Powys and Gwynedd were part of the original Celtic tribes along with Dumnonia. So let's see what we're doing. We've got Army 1 and Army 2, and we could decide to attack the enemy at this stage because they won't really defend that land with much at this stage. And if you move two armies into the same territory, it means they will both attack, and that means that you've got even greater chance of defeating that enemy. So let's see what I can do now. If 242 silver crowns at our disposal, whatever that was, money was left over from the Roman period at this stage, but nobody had told the Britons that you make bricks out of clay, so they tried making pots and pans out of mud, and that didn't really stick together. So this is after the Roman period, no matter what calendar date it says, so we definitely know that. And you can see Dunmurray is doing a very good job of keeping guard of that south coast. And we haven't activated Reged, which is Lancashire and Yorkshire yet, because no forces are in there. So I'm taking part actually as the Irish at the moment, and we can take that as read that we mean those Celts who moved to Ireland and then back over to Britain. So if we click on these and move them both in, then hopefully on the next turn they'll both attack that enemy, and you can see the flag there. And blue is kind of Woad colour, and Woad named after Woden, and all of the Saxons you can see in the east of Britain, they're all descendants of Woden. So let's move our troops into Stafford, and it's worth 41 silver per turn. It's lowlands, so we can move into that fairly quickly. And movement points, I think I've got 1, so let's see, Army 1 and Army 2, they're still waiting to attack, and we've got nothing in the castle there, no armies there, that's fine, nothing, no armies. And in here we've got 40 in the castle and 25 in the castle. Well, probably better to kick those out, but let's skip the turn anyway to see how the battle went. And then what we get is the battle scenario screen, which pops up and says, you want to engage in battle? Do you want to run away? Well, we definitely want to engage in battle, and then that will bring up a very rudimentary mainframe type of battle scenario where we get to see what they've got. Look, they've got a knight, and we've got 8 knights and they've got 1, so that's what I mean about building the knights up early. Because we've got 8 and they've only got 1, those 8 knights should be able to clear up the entire field, and the crossbowmen will be able to take over the rest from a distance. And so catapults, aim at catapults at the castle. Have we got any catapults? Not at the moment. And the attacker wins. So by combining our knights, we probably had 4 knights per division, and we've combined those divisions now to take over that territory. But if we want to take over any provinces with a tower, we're definitely going to have to need catapults for that. And so we're now defending ourselves. Let's hope that the Saxons move north so that we can move north. And yes, it looks like the Saxon armies at this point are taking over that territory. And look at that, they are, well, it's overcast. It tells us the weather, it's overcast. It's got no defenders in it, and that's our blue territory, so that means the enemy will take it. That's not a big deal at this point, but it means that we will have to put some knights there to defend, otherwise that's going to be a problem. So every 6 months, hopefully, according to the manual, but I've only known this happen after the first 6 months, we'll get an archery lesson, and you can see some wonderful graphics as we get a target to fire. And I think we hold down the fire button to increase the power or something like that, and maybe push up and down to move the ball around the screen, and I think we can maybe press the space bar as well to make that longer or shorter or nearer to us. And so we'll have to get the power right, and we'll also have to judge that with the wind as well. The wind speed is blowing against us at the moment. So Albion, it's got, well, shot 3, he's managed to score 1 point. So target is now 30 paces away, so that means you're going to increase your speed and it's a further distance away. So all the other players in the game, all the other tribes and kingdoms will then have their go and the target will be moved back. So let's increase the power all the way up there, and let's extend the bow so we've got most of the reach on that, so that when we fire, it should fire on target. Let's increase our altitude so the arc's over, maximum reach, maximum power, and oh, that's a good shot, 5 points. And this is competing against all the other kings, so it's best to aim high, I think, in this game. according to that, we missed that target. So that's 6 points to us. White Horse got 34 points and all the others, so let's press that fire button, get through all those others. And Albion, now the target is 90 paces back. We're going to have to put full power on the thing, full distance away. We're going to have to judge that wind speed, and we're going to have to arc that missile all the way over to it. And that's short again, so let's raise and use the thing and put it all the way up there, and missed again, so we definitely need to increase our altitude so that it arcs over. Let's give it full power, and yes! Which means after all that we get 4 targets, and then after that we get the leaderboard. So this is our 4th target now. It's all the way over to the other side of the back wall, and it's a pity that we don't get any music, but what we do get is some tremendous graphics as well. And this is like PGA Tour golf. You have to do the wind speed and the power and the distance and the strike and the stroke and the arc, and once you've got all those lined up, we can pop the ball in the hole. And finally we get that leaderboard. Albion 16 and 8th at the bottom. We've got 16 points from that, so that means we're the least kingdom. Unlike Defender of the Crown, unfortunately we don't get anything for a high score, we just get some prestige. So we don't get any land or any money for doing that. And you can see a bit later on in the game I've spent a bit of money and I've built some small forts down the south of our kingdom, and up north we've managed to extend. So you can see my armies, we're trying to get into Element region, which is in the Pennines. We've got Reged, but we've captured it, but we've got nobody defending it. So only our armies at this point are defending that area. And what we've got no defenders in this area, because again the enemies don't bother defending their land either, unless they've got some kind of army in there. And unless it's a tower or something like that, there's no point defending it anyway. But you can see the defenders have got tons and tons of defenders in there, and they're 120 to our 60. We only have, well, we've got 30 knights, so do you want to give those orders? It looks like we're going through them, and well, those numbers are going down. 30 knights, and give orders to continue. Every time we click we can continue in this game, and I think we can even retreat as well, definitely in the second game. And we're down to 12 knights now, but that's all the soldiers gone, and so they've just got 6 and 6, and so they've got 2 archers and 0. So with 30 knights it is possible to take out a huge great load of defenders, twice our power. And so that's practical use. All you need is the knights, and that means that none of your money's wasted. They can take care of everything for us as long as we have those defenders, and definitely spend money on the big guns, and then that means that we can not only defend but attack things as well. And so it looks like we attack one of the enemy's armies, and that's always problematic. And usually you have to combine things together to get to that point. And so combining armies definitely is something that we really want to do. It's now 1421. So we lost the Roman technology, and at this period we had the Roman roads to navigate Britain, and that was it. We could move up and down rivers, but we weren't amazing. We certainly weren't anywhere near the Vikings, which came later in terms of navigating rivers and oceans. Look at that, Halifax is gone, but we've got Sheffield. So we have got a nice big range. We've got 448 silver in. Look at the silver per land now. There's really a lot rolling in, which is tremendous. Birmingham is really coining it in for us, and we've got Army 3 there, strength of 113. So Army 3 can definitely be moved, probably. And I'm probably not going to upgrade this to any kind of status, and unless you upgrade it ×2 up to tower status. You can see some small forts there which aren't going to do anything, but the tower you can see in the bottom right corner, that tower, you can actually buy troops from that, and that saves us having to drag them all the way over from Diffid, where we started from. So that's no problem, because we can go through captured territories without losing too many moves. That means we can send knights up to the front pretty easily and pretty quickly. So let's see what we decide to do in this particular game. There are some things to the south. Army 3 is going to the south. Do we leave? Well, I don't think we need catapults to lay siege to that particular garrison building, because it's not a tower, it's just a little fort. And so we're going for Stratford on Avon. And in Reged, well, we've got 41 people in the hill fort, which isn't really amazing. And we've got 19 here, 4 people there, 2, 16, 6, 0. So again, all the ones in the middle should be 0, and all the ones on the outside should be something to defend ourselves. And if you've got a tiny fort there, then it's better than nothing, and that only costs 25 silver. So what we're going to do, or what would you do in this particular case? You'd get a shed load of knights together, and you'd send that lock, stock and barrel out to take over Dunmoria, and you'll probably leave most of the Saxons to the Picts in the north, and you can see the Picts and the Scotti are already taking over. And once we've taken over Dumnonia, that should mean that we've got half of this kingdom, and the other half should be easy, because you can bottleneck all the enemies up in the north of the kingdom. And when they're all spread out, they can get around us, and that's definitely not something that you want to do, definitely not in the sequel either, because the enemies love to surround us and crush us. So we really need to put a border line up, and we need to defend that border with units of maybe 120, and then hopefully those will stand the invasion. So we need 2 armies to withstand attacks in the north, and in this particular play I'm having to sacrifice Reged and Lancashire, because we really need these 2 regions, Sheffield in particular, to defend ourselves against all these attackers. So we've got Army 3 still there. So do we leave that where it is? Yes, Army 3 will defend itself. So lay siege to the castle. Well, let's lay siege to that castle again, and we get a good look of what's in there, even if we choose to run away. So give orders to continue. What have we got? What have they got? Well, we've got 22 knights, and they've got nothing. So that means that our knights march in and chop the heads off, and now we are landowners. And again it moves on to the turn of all these other tribes, and that's all you have to do, is take over all the land and take over all these tribes. And that's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of this playthrough. And it's a great pity that there isn't a Settlers-like soundtrack to this, because it would be very much like the Settlers if it had just a bit more depth to it. So as you can see me continuing with that, we'll just go through the backstory. And so about 300 the Irish land in Diffid, and around 383 Maximus is proclaimed the Emperor of the British. He's the last of the Romans. He then departs, and by 401 the last of the Romans have left Hadrian's Wall, which leaves it undefended. And so by 406, Marcus Maximus' death, unfortunately, it means that there are different rulers of Britain and local tribes take over. In 409, the expulsion of the last Roman magistrates. So the king of the north, Colhen, dies in 420 AD, and that means the kingdom of the north is split between his sons Cernu, who gains Reged, and later on his other son gains Brynick, which was Yorkshire in those days. And in 425 Vortigern becomes the king of Powys, because Powys, don't forget, in 420 the Irish have already taken over Brycheiniog, so that means all of South Wales is now the domain of the Irish, so only Powys and Gwynedd remain. So Vortigern, having the biggest kingdom, becomes the acting king of the country. And moving forward in time, Vortigern's base is said to be at Dinas Faron Dangl, which was in Gwynedd, and so he had a big kingdom halfway into Gwynedd. And moving forward in time, we see that Ambrosius of Dumnonia was also a big threat. He and Vortigern had a big row, and Vortigern killed Ambrosius Senior and also the brother, and so Ambrosius Junior had to emigrate to Brittany, which the Dumnonians owned at that time, so he left. And in 450 Arthur of Reged is born, and in 449 Vortigern goes over to Denmark and invites a load of Jutes and Saxons and Angles into the country to defend against the Picts, who were really making life difficult at that point. So in 450 the Saxons, Hengist came along, he lands in Kent, and they defeat the Picts in the north, and for that they were given lands in Kent. And so in round about 450 Octa and Ebusa subsequently land in Scotland and take on the Picts, and then Hengist and Horsa are given lands in Kent. But unfortunately Vortimer, the son of Vortigern, gets on the case of the Saxons, and they have a big battle, and Vortimer has a number of battles in Kent, and the Battle of Aylesford and the Battle of Derrent River. And in 455, with the death of Vortimer, he puts a stop to them temporarily, and then in 455 Hengist is made king of Kent, and in 460 Vortigern dies, which hands it over to Ambrosius of Dumnonia. So Ambrosius Aurelius is now supposed to be acting king of Britain, and he has Arthur of Somerset in the later part of his reign. And Arthur of Somerset is he runs the field force, the mobile field force, basically the army of Ambrosius, and Ambrosius battles the Saxons in Kent a long time, and then in 477 Ali of the South Saxons lands in the south coast, the Weald, and creates Sussex. And by this time we've got Saxons in the east of the country and Sussex as well. And so 491 the forces trying to get rid of Ambrosius and Vortigern, so they have a big battle called the Battle of Baden. And at that big battle in Bath, at the Star Fort in Bath, the Saxons try to encircle the Star Fort, and then Ambrosius comes along and encircles the Saxons, and it's a big massacre. And we had peace for a bit, and then the Saxons came along again and landed in Northumberland and took over all Northumberland and things like that, and Lincolnshire. So all of these coast is taken over by the Saxons, and Cerdic lands, and he slew a British High King, and he took over Netley region, now Hampshire. And so all the way down, the Dumnonia guys are now trapped in the south of the country, and the North Welsh guys are now trapped. And so Uther Pendragon, who was second in command in Dumnonia, gets command when the king dies, and he takes Octa's son of Osk of Kent and Eosa and defeats them. But it doesn't last very long, and they have more battles, and then King Eichel supposedly led his people across the North Sea to Britain in 515, so Archery lands in Anglia, and they settle in what would be Suffolk, and they start to move ahead, and then King Arthur of Reged is involved in loads of battles. He goes up to Northumberland to try to knock them out at Bassas, and he fights them off and fights them all the way back to their territory, and he goes up to he battles the Caledonians in the Battle of the Caledonian Woods, and he goes up to Fort Gwinion, wherever that is, and he has another battle at Urbis Legionis, which is perhaps Regiolium, which was Castleford in Wakefield, known as Elmet, and he had loads of other battles, and he went up to Scotland and tried to take care of the Picts for us. He went up to Mons Agneed, which is Edinburgh, and finally he is defeated at the Battle of Camlan Field, which is an area just, well, north of Stirling, north of the Antonine Wall, where the Romans had a bit of a garrison building, and that was called Camlan, and so the Lothian lot and the Picts all got together and crushed Arthur and Camlan, and he was taken north and buried there. And so years later, of course, French writers came along and said that it was all Mordred and Arthur and Merlin and all the rest of it, but actually the real story is Arthur then died, unfortunately, north of Stirling, and that handed it over to his sons, who were then battling the guys in the east, and they didn't last very long either because the Saxons came along, and by 527 Arkel had established Mercia. They'd gone through East Anglia and had started to invade Mercia, and so the Battle of Camelford in 537, and you get all these battles going on for years and years, and slowly but surely all the Saxons gained their way. Eventually we get to the Battle of Metclaut, which was when they hauled them all up on Lindisfarne, and they had a big battle, and Irian of Reged got killed by Morgant Bluke, and Morgant was called Mordred in the old stories, and Irian was actually a substitute for Arthur. Anyway, Morgant killed him, and he was buried under a stack of stones all the way up there. That was all the way back then, and then he got killed, and so Ewan's son Owen got Reged in 595 and fought the Angles of Derry and Benicia, and then shortly after that he was slain. So it didn't take long after that before the West Saxons got all the way to Britain, and all the way through Britain, and to attack. In this particular case, we can see that we've managed to attack all the enemy's forts on the south coast, which means the enemies have created little hill forts for us, and we don't have to attack those, and so we can just simply take those on. At this stage I'm simply buying knights, because knights are the most critical thing, and I reckon if you have 50 knights, that more or less takes care of any of the field armies that the enemies have got at this point. And of course you can always roll armies together. So even though it says strength 70, if those strength 70 is made out of 40 knights, then obviously that's going to be more powerful than quite a lot of the enemy, and if you can divide the enemy up at this point, it means they'll eventually get less and less money to spend on their own defensive units. So as you knock them out, they won't be able to build them back up again, and that's critical in the second game, not so critical in this one. But you can see the enemy forts are simply lining up to get knocked down, and it doesn't matter which one of these I attack at this point, and probably going for the south one is best, and then I can push all the rest up north, because that would seem like a good opportunity to crush the enemy. So let's do that. Let's go up to the first one, and then we can attack the second one, and the third one, well, increasingly less silver as we go up the coast. And then Colchester, look at that, it's got 3 armies in there. So you run the risk, if it's got 3 armies in there, that they'll attack us and we will get cut off. We don't really want to get cut off because Halifax in the Helmet region has been cut off already, and we still can't strike north at this point, not that we really want to, because Cheshire is the gate to Wales, and as long as we guard Cheshire, it means we can hold back those enemies, and that's the most important thing at this point, as well as clearing out all of the enemies which are holed up in the castle. Hopefully most of those are knights, and so it looks like we're moving 10 knights north at the moment because they're strong. They should be able to take over that territory, but will they be able to defend it? That's the problem. I should really be barreling 50 knights into that area, but again, I really want to leave this till the last part of the game, and really as long as we have, well, knights in the castle and knights in the field, it should mean that we can defend the area against the enemy. So what we're going to do in this area, it looks like what we're doing is leaving those knights to defend the area, and that's a good idea, definitely, because we really don't want at this stage to be attacked and pushed back, because every time we are, it means the enemy gains that cash but also that land. So in this game, it's a long strategy game, and plays will take several hours at minimum. It's pretty restrictive because I think where you start is based on the opponent that you choose to use, and the first one, the blue one, I think is the easy mode, and definitely the picks. If you start up in North Scotland facing the Scotty as soon as you start, they can back you into a corner and you'll run out of cash. So I'm not sure if you can start as the Picts in this game. I think you can only start as the Welsh guys and the South Coast guys from Dumnonia, and I think maybe even the Saxons. So it's a good idea, of course, to scout the area by clicking on that before you attack it. And crossbowmen and knights is my favourite because crossbowmen don't cost a lot and they can attack the soldiers before they even reach them. So that means they can be cutting the soldiers down before they even get attacked, and then they can defend the knights from a longer distance. So crossbowmen come in handy for a large number of reasons, and are also cheaper in this game than archers, which perhaps are longbowmen. According to the manual, the longbowmen are supposed to be better, but the crossbowmen can fire at twice the rate, so it's horses for courses really, it's whatever you decide to do. So you can see that defenders have managed to, well, we're battling against the enemy here and we're only defending it by 3 knights. You can see even with 3 knights they do take a chunk out of the enemy, but as predicted they've managed to cut us off, and that means the Dumnonia lot, the guys who are supposed to be on our side, have actually cut us off. So the best thing to do in that situation is to hold back for a few turns, collect your armies together, move everybody to the front line, and then put everybody together and take that region en masse. And I think that's what I'm doing at the moment. The defenders are crumbling under my forces, and as long as we have those knights, that's good. So that's what we're doing. Lay siege to that castle, 40 knights there, and you can actually speed up the battle mode as well. If you hold down the right mouse button you can speed it up, or click wildly with left, it means you can just get through it, and that's handy, and that means that we can just get through those battles pretty quickly. So we're taking it out en masse now, we've divided it, and you can see that the main battle army is actually in the north, which is fantastic because that means it's taking on the Saxons and it's leaving us alone. So the Saxons have got all of the north, which is pretty accurate to how it was, and the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes captured everything, but unlike history, we've managed to capture all of the south of Britain. We just need the south coast to go. So at this point I really would recommend taking out Somerset, and then we can get to Devon and Cornwall and start moving our way up. Don't bother going through anything else. But what I'm probably actually going to do, because it's the richest county, I'm probably going to move through Kent and move through the south coast that way. And as long as we keep the front line going, it should mean that we can keep the regions pretty empty in the middle. And still at this point, I'm still not building anything in the way of castles. Why would anybody? Because you can see that the enemy don't bother, so why should we? And they don't get any harder as they go through the game, so the only reason why I would upgrade a castle is to change it into a tower. That means that we can hire guys from the tower, and you can see that we have captured a tower, so we can hire guys to do that. And 4 forces are in that region, so we'll get to see them. The castle's got 40 in it, this guy's got 70 in it, he's attacking 18, so I'm sending out a small force at the moment to check out the enemy territory, and we'll see how that goes. And it looks like the Saxons have been cut off as well, which is great, and so we'll see how that goes. Let's skip on and let's engage in the battle. And so the defenders are many, they've only got 5 knights, and so the defence force is again bigger than us, total men bigger than us, total fighting points, I'm not quite sure what that means, but usually if the bigger number is on our side, then that means that we can get through them. So we've managed to kick them out, but they've taken us back again because they can do that on their turn, and when we skip our turn it means the enemies will go through their turn one at a time, going in order. I think it goes blue, yellow, green, and then white, and then I think maybe the last one is the grey one, which has been defeated already. So you can see that the Saxons are trying to take out the Scots now, which saves us a job, because if there are less enemies on the map, it just means that all the better. They're wasting their resources taking out enemies, and all of these lands that are vacant to the north will literally be vacant. So let's now pile all of our armies in there, and let's now lay siege to the south coast, and again en masse, if you can do that by at least getting maybe 40 knights together and a nice load of catapults. And it doesn't matter if you leave 7 guys knocking around in the castles. You can see well, there are pretty highly defended in the north, but this 50 can be kicked out because this isn't really serving much, and this 50 can be attacking those guys to the east, which would make the better sense. So let's save maybe 10 and 10, so that can't be taken back as soon as we attack the enemy, and well, maybe 10 knights is enough to defend any fortification at this point, particularly because the enemy can't reinforce its troops, because they're not towers, they're only little small defensive bases that they've got at the moment. So the enemy is not intelligent enough at this point to defend itself. If you like this game, definitely check out the second game, which is probably better because it's harder, and the difficulty modes make sure that it's a real difficult game at the start, and many players said that they couldn't get anywhere at the start of the second game unless they put it on insultingly easy mode. And so the trick is, yet again, if you start out in Wales you can defend it, or on the south coast you can capture all that land before the enemy. In the second game the enemies can respawn randomly anywhere on the map, and they have any castles anywhere, and we can also drop down and place our castle anywhere we like. But in the second game the enemy isn't intelligent enough to create an extra field army, So every time we knock out a field army, unfortunately it won't create a new one, which is a major drawback. And it means once you've captured all of the enemy's failed armies, it means unfortunately that's game over for the enemy in the second game. I'm not quite sure how it works in this game, but I think that they do field some extra armies if you do demolish them, and they do try to defend themselves. So there are major drawbacks with each of these games. The first one is way too easy once you get over the hump of sending out loads of guys at the beginning of it. And the second one is way too hard because the enemies will surround you and attack you, take down all of your forces, and then that's redundant as soon as you've got rid of all the enemy forces. So the third game, the Germany game, is just a rebadge. I think it came out in 1995, which is, well, 6 years after this thing came out, something like that. It's just a rebadge in Germany, and they've turned up the colours. So this could have been so much more, it could have been so much deeper, but I'm glad it doesn't go too deep at this point, and then you can simply get on with that battling action. You can see we have not much luck in the archery, but we are actually getting some on target on this particular try. Now that we've actually got a bit further with the game, we can hopefully aim for those targets. We've got 36 points in total so far, and that's probably still at the bottom of the rank. And now we've got our final one to go. We're going to aim sky high for this, and ooh, still short, so let's aim for the battlements, full power. Let's ignore the wind, let's just chuck it in there, and it went straight over. So it's great to see the battlements, and it's great to see those tremendous graphics. I just wish there were maybe 2 or 3 extra sub-games, like attacking a castle, knocking the walls down, and that really wasn't improved in the sequel. You get some readouts when you're attacking that castle, and that's about it. And once those readouts go to 0, then that's the castle walls done. We don't actually get any arcade action, which is a shame. And so all the arcade action is in this game, basically narrowed down to that one small section. So look at that, the enemy has built the castles, which it will do in this version 1 of the game, which is good. And it's great that the enemy has some intelligence to do that, and to field extra units and things like that, but it's not really intelligent once it runs out of cash. We've definitely got cash in the bank with 1,211 silver crowns in the bank, whatever that might be. So that means that every single turn we can create a defence force, a knockout party, a demolition squad, and we can also choose to upgrade as well. So we can upgrade any structure, and once it gets over 25 points, that means it's a tower. That means we can buy units from the tower, and we don't have to ferry them all the way from our starting base. So if you want to do that, it's pretty cheap to do that, and that's the only thing that I do. But if you want to allocate the entire lot, 200 points to any structural unit, and that's a heck of a lot of money to waste. That will then give you the best castle in the game, which is impregnable, and that means that you can defend that with virtually 0 archers, and it will still stand in case of enemies taking that over. We've built one here, and then we can basically hire guys. Now that's tremendously overkill. You don't have to build the best castles in the game, and the enemies certainly won't be doing that. But all we need to do is to spend $1,000 on those knights, or 1,000 units, whatever it might be, and that's a wrecking ball to take out the rest of the game. So we can do that, but we're playing the slow game at the moment, and you can see we're just about to take care of another of the enemies in the south of this kingdom. So I did enjoy my time playing this, but I didn't have any massive urges to play it again as any of the other tribes. And it can be a steep learning curve at the beginning, and until you have enough forces to defend yourself, of course. But then it has pluses and minuses. It's better than a public domain game, but because this was released commercially, probably at 25 quid, it's not something that you want to come back to again and again and again, like Lotus or Turrican 2 or the Lost Vikings or anything like that. It's one of those things that you'll sit down and play and really enjoy yourself defeating it, and then you'll probably move on to something else with a bit more meat behind it. And that's one thing I'll say about this game, and that's why the magazine scores were a bit low. Definitely see Amiga complained that there wasn't much substance behind the game. There's nothing wrong with the graphics, but it didn't have any sound effects either. Checking out those scores, CEO Amiga gave this 61%, Lemon Amiga gave it 66 for those reasons, Amiga Action gave it 66, and Dato Magazine gave it 70%, and the highest score, of course, as usual, goes to The One, who gave this a massive 80%, saying that this was the best game ever released on the Amiga ever. And so, if you like Defender of the Crown, then that's got the sub-games, and that's got more replay value than this. But if you want to get into the series, definitely playing the first game is important, because that will give you the heads up for playing the rest. If you jump into the sequel, the Vikings game, then that will really kick your behind all over the map until you've learned how to do it. All of this land has now been taken over by other kingdoms, so that means that now the yellow guy is now off my back. So just the small matter now of taking over the north, and I think I was playing this on the disc version when I played this, and when I took over the required territories, unfortunately the game crashed, which isn't amazing. Maybe on different cracks that doesn't crash. So that's one word of warning if you're going to play this. I'm not sure if you can save it up, and I think there is actually a quick key, L and S, to load and save in the sequel, so maybe pressing L and S you can save in this one, and if you didn't have the manual, that's something to look out for. But definitely style over some kind of substance in this game. It's definitely fun to play it, conquer all these realms and march on in there with a wrecking ball, but I wouldn't say it's something that you can come back to again and again and again. So that means the average score for this game is around about 7 out of 10, the one score really dragging it up there. It would have been 6.5 if it wasn't for that. So there's nothing wrong with this game, great graphics, great playability, very easy to control, quite intuitive controls, it's all on the mouse. And so you don't have to read a big thick manual to get through this, it's not as hard even as Civilization. So it's a watered down battle simulator, so definitely check this out if you like quite easy battle simulators, even though most people said that this game is quite difficult at the start, and it really is a matter of knowing how to defend yourself, otherwise the enemies will defeat you in this game. So thank you very much for viewing this Playguide review on our Medieval Banquet series, and I hope to see you on another one sometime soon. Thank you.